Okay, let's just jump right in. Have you ever stopped and thought about how on Earth we can even begin to make sense of something as massive as, well, as complicated as a society? It seems kind of impossible, right? Well, it turns out sociologists have a few tricks up their sleeve. They use different lenses to see the world. You see, if you put on one lens, society looks like this incredibly smooth, well-oiled machine where every single part has a job to do. But then, you put on another lens, and suddenly it's a chaotic arena where different groups are constantly fighting for power. It's the same world, you're just seeing it in a completely different way, and these two competing views are really at the heart of what we're digging into here. Now, to really get a handle on these different views, we need a framework, and in sociology, that's called a paradigm. The easiest way to think about it is like a mental toolkit. It's not just a pile of facts, it's a model for how you think about those facts. It literally frames your perspective and decides which questions you're even going to ask in the first place.
So why does this matter so much? Well, because raw facts, all by themselves, they don't really tell you a whole lot. They don't come with the user manual, you know? They need a paradigm to give them meaning. Let's actually put this to the test. All right, here is a simple, objective fact. A group of people, they're holding signs, and they've blocked a highway. That's it. That's what happened. No spin. But what does it actually mean?
Well, if you're looking through one particular lens, your brain might immediately ask this: is this just a glitch in the system? You know, a malfunction that's messing up the smooth operation of society.
But then, if you switch to a totally different lens, you ask a completely different question. Is this a group fighting for its own interests against someone or something more powerful? See? It's the exact same fact, but the paradigm you use leads to two totally different interpretations. And that is why these frameworks are so crucial.
Okay, so let's grab our first lens. This one's a macro-level view, so think of it like we're using a telescope to see the big picture. We're zooming way out to look at the large-scale structures, and our first stop is that well-oiled machine perspective.
This is called structural functionalism. A thinker you gotta know for this is Emil Durkheim. He was a huge pioneer of this view. He saw society as a complex organism, you know, like a living body. He argued that every part, family, religion, the economy, you name it, has a specific function, and they all work together to keep the whole system stable and healthy.
So, functionalism breaks these purposes down into three types. Let's take schools, for example. Their manifest function, that's the obvious intended one, is to educate people. But they also have latent functions, which are kind of like unintended side effects, like being a giant daycare or teaching us all how to meet deadlines. And what if a part causes a problem, like schools accidentally creating social inequality? Well, that's what we'd call a dysfunction. All right, you ready? Let's flip the script completely and look at our second macro theory. This one throws that whole idea of harmony right out the window. Instead, it sees a constant tug of war.
This is conflict theory, and it sees society not as a stable organism, but as an arena where different groups are in a constant battle over scarce resources. We're talking about things like power, money, and status. So the key idea here is that inequality is the engine that drives conflict and ultimately change.
And this idea of conflict isn't just about one thing either. Karl Marx, of course, famously focused on class conflict, the struggle between capitalists and workers. But other brilliant thinkers, like W.E.B. Du Bois, took that idea and applied it to race conflict. And then, of course, you have feminist theory, which looks at the power struggle between genders. The core idea is always the same, though. Society's structures tend to benefit some groups at the expense of others.
So let's put these two heavyweights side by side for a second. Functionalism, with Durkheim, is always asking, how does this create stability? It sees that well-oiled machine. But conflict theory, with Marx, is asking, who's getting the short end of the stick here? Where's the inequality? It sees that chaotic arena. Two macro lenses, two profoundly different ways of seeing the exact same society.
But hold on a minute. Is the big picture the whole story? I mean, what about our day-to-day lives? For that, we need to put down the telescope and pick up the microscope. We need to see how society is built, one single interaction at a time.
This brings us to symbolic interactionism, a micro-level theory influenced by folks like Max Weber. And man, does this flip our perspective. It argues that society isn't some giant thing that's just out there. No, society is the product of our reality, something we build from the ground up through the millions of tiny interactions we have every single day. The focus is on the shared meanings we create and attach to symbols, and that's everything from language to a red light to a simple handshake. Just think about a simple hand wave. As a raw fact, it's just a physical motion, right? My hand moving through the air. But here's where the magic happens.
As a society, we all attach a shared meaning to it. We agree that this symbol means hello. And as soon as that meaning is shared, the physical motion transforms into a social action, a greeting. And we do this all day, every day. This is literally how we construct our social reality.
So we've got the stable machine, the chaotic arena, and this world we're all building together, one interaction at a time. This leaves us with one really obvious question.
So which one is right? Is it functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism? Well, it turns out that's actually the wrong question to be asking.
Here's the most important thing to take away from all this. These lenses aren't in some cage match to be the one true theory. They're just different tools for different jobs. Each one helps us see a different piece of this incredibly complex puzzle we call society.
Let's just boil it all down real quick. If you want to understand what holds society together, what keeps it stable, the functionalist lens is your best tool. If you're more interested in inequality, power, and how societies change over time, you're going to want to grab the conflict theory lens. And if you want to get at how we as individuals literally create the world we live in moment to moment, then the symbolic interactionist lens is the one you need.
By learning how to switch between these lenses, we get a much richer, more complete picture of our social world. So the final question, really, I'm turning back to you. When you look around at your life, which lens helps you make sense of what you see every single day?